Hey guys, and welcome to my channel. My name is Sarah and I will be creating a portrait painting. Now this work will be divided into two videos. The first part will be portrait drawing and second video will be portrait painting. And this is the first part, which is the portrait drawing. For this tutorial, I will be copying the portrait of Yurkevich by Repin created in 1879 using screen-based reference. Ilya Repin is one of the main artists in figurative painting in the 19th and 20th century. Personally, I found that his subtle strokes on the canvas and the deep expressions of his portraits are very interesting and intriguing. The materials I will be using for this video are a brownish charcoal for my drawing, fine and wider brush, a portrait canvas, size around 40 by 30 centimeters, an acrylic burnt umber and titanium white for the first layer of the painting. Throughout the portrait drawing, I will be explaining proportions, anatomy and values, and the importance of each to create a realistic drawing. Along the drawing, I will give links to video I created that can help you and guide you if you are having trouble drawing. It may be time-consuming for some of you, but a realistic drawing and painting takes patience as well as some breaks and stepping back to better assess the work. And now, if you are ready, let's start. To have a good realistic drawing, you need to depict correct proportions for the main structure, understand the anatomical form, and recreate the light and shadows. Proportions are the relations between face features by drawing circles, ovals, horizontal and vertical lines to establish the right measurements of the face features, which are eyes, nose, mouth, ears, hairline, etc. I've created a video for the main basic proportion that could be helpful to create a step-by-step 3D hat. Keep in mind that measurements differs from a person to another, so one of the best methods I am currently using is visual observation. Basically, I am looking at the portrait to place the face features of the model, starting with simple geometric forms. Now what I am doing is that I have started by drawing an oval, an X shape, which is the basis of the hat. I always start a drawing by using basic geometric forms for proportions measurement, which are basic elements of a portrait such as ovals and tangible lines. This stage is an easy first step into drawing, and if you are having trouble drawing these elements, you can correct them gradually in drawing. Through visual understanding, I use observation to roughly recreate the proportions measurement and set the basis for my anatomical features by adding simple informations and elements to relate the face features together. Note that in this case, the head is rotated, which means the measurements change. A circle becomes an oval, lines become more tangible, and the height and width of the face features become disproportionate. The head of our model is slightly turned to the left and directed downward. Now I have drawn the lines of the eyes, the nose, mouth, and the basic form of the ear and the contour of the hair and the neck. When my basic lines are ready, I will divide them into smaller lines for our structure so that the drawing turns into organic shapes. I am using a brownish charcoal, a sanguine, because later on when I will be using acrylic burnt umber to draw out the linear construct, the use of sanguine will merge beautifully with the burnt umber. Now what I'm doing in my drawing is that throughout the tracing of the face feature, I accentuate more and more on the important points. Even if my organic forms are not 100% correct, as the drawing progresses, I will correct errors along the way. Anatomy understanding creates a realistic figure by giving depth to the drawing. Furthermore, anatomy helps in grasping the form when moved or rotated. The shape comes from the bones and the expressions come from the muscles. The rectangle just above the right eyebrow is the lightest value. As I am working on the proportions in anatomy, I start by working on the block ends, which means the shape values from dark to light. This work is called rhythm because I am applying the three principles at the same times. And just for a reminder, the three principles are proportions, anatomy, and values. For me, applying and working in rhythm, it is faster and more efficient. But it is important to take your time in a drawing. It depends on your speed and understanding of these three principles. In the end, patience is the key to success. The head of my drawing is slightly inclined and turned to the left. That is why the nose is directed downwards and to the left. And for the zygomatic bones and eyes, zygomatic, which means the cheekbones, perspective helps me visually understand that one of the eye is slightly bigger than the other. And in this case, it is the one on the right that is slightly bigger than the left eye. I finished by drawing the shape of my ear, roughly. And I would like to talk to you a bit about the errors and imperfections. By taking some steps back on my work, I can assess better and correct what needs to be corrected. But I'm going to give you a little tip for what I do. Personally, I like to keep on purpose some imperfections, which will create a certain expression unique to my work, thus creating an inspiration of the original painting rather than a simple copy. And now let's talk about light and shadows. Throughout observation of the original painting, I tried to visually grasp the direction of the light. The shadows will help me identify that the light direction, in this case, comes from an upper right side. Usually, we tend to start working on the values and block ends when the main organic shapes and anatomy forms are set. But in this case, I chose to alternate between my three principles, which are again values, proportions, and anatomy, working in rhythm because the model's beard is on the dark side of the value, which means it's darker than the rest of the face. My canvas is not 100% stable, so that is why you see me holding it from time to time. When I start with the values, I usually start with the darkest shadow and climb my way up to the lightest light. It's better if you call it highlight. So I climb my way up to the lightest spot without reinforcing my strokes. As things progresses and as my drawing becomes closer to the result I am aiming for, I increase the density of my strokes. Let's dive a little more in the values to understand better their input in the whole process. We have first the highlight, which is the lightest area and depends on the viewer's position, whether it's a real-life drawing or a 2D model like in this case. It is the focal point of the composition where you want the viewers to focus on the first second they set their eyes on. It is a composition trick if well manipulated. Now for the coarse shadow. By determining the light and how it is projected on the subject, we start by the darkest shadow. It is a major anchor point from which you walk towards the lightest part. And it is not on the exact opposite side of the highlight, simply because of reflected light that is bounced back into shadow from the environment surrounding the subject. Halftones are everything between highlight and darkest shadow. So it is the nuances between black and white, if you wish. Working from dark to light, I gradually manipulate my charcoal to get a nice effect, which means halftones are not the same everywhere. Some are darker and some are lighter. Now, last but not least, reflected light. As I was saying, reflected light is a tricky part of the shaded area, but lighter than the coarse shadow. It's a bit tricky and not very noticeable, so it's very subtle, but extremely important to give a realistic effect. That is why it is the last thing I personally work on. Now that you know how the light and darkness work together to create depth and value, I repeat the whole process over and over again to get a satisfying result, which means I accentuate the shadows. I keep on working on accentuating on the shadows area by working layer after layer to obtain a beautiful rendering, which means I increase the density of my strokes by emphasizing on the darkest area, keeping in mind the halftones and the highlights. Each strokes that create the value effect will be organized and placed according to the visual understanding and analysis of the original painting. It may help you if you turn the original painting into monochrome to better understand this process. I usually use the whiteness of my canvas for the highlight and add slightly and gradually halftones. That is why I do not use white chalk to enhance the lightness. When working on a drawing and painting, I usually take several breaks. This helps me assess better my work and have every time a fresh look on the work. I will not work much on the drawing because it is a preliminary basis of my painting, which means my intention is not to do a realistic drawing, but rather a realistic painting. So that is why it is important to keep the preliminary basis of my painting using correctly the three principles. So I vaguely draw the rest, clothes and hair, and keep marking the structure and the face features because they are important informations when I will start using painting. The materials I will be using are acrylic burnt umber and titanium white, a white brush for block-ins and softer one for details. By using first only acrylic burnt umber, I trace the lines of my drawing charcoal with a fine brush. You can always correct later on, but so as not to lose the charcoal drawing, I trace the lines with acrylic paint. As I've said earlier, the brownish charcoal I used for the drawing will merge beautifully with burnt umber, leaving a clean and beautiful underpainting. Keep in mind, I am not doing a 100% accurate portrait painting in this stage. Rather, I am inspired by the original painting and let my strokes appear as I glaze on. Glazing is a technique used to bring together light and dark tones. You can create this effect by mixing acrylic paint with water. I am respecting the intense gaze and expression of the original portrait while letting my strokes show. This is why I don't blur different values together, and acrylic paint helped me with that since it dries up really fast. I use a slightly thicker brush to finish filling in the shadows I have. I continue to use burnt umber while working on the darkness of the hair. I work on the reflected light and keep in mind that it is in the reflection of the environment, in this case the shirt collar, that bounces back on the right side limit of the jaw. Using a thicker brush, I mix the acrylic burnt umber with water to create a washing effect for the halftones as I alternate between lighter and darker area of the halftones. While keeping noticeable the highlights, I continue working from dark to light. First, I work on the dark halftones and gradually walk toward the lights. By leaving aside for the moment the lighter sides of the halftones, I continue working on the darker ones. I continue by mixing burnt umber with water to apply my dark halftones. We continue working gradually this chiaroscuro effect, which means the balance between light and shadow, and as we work on, we correct mistakes and proportions. With the use of a thick brush, I now mix burnt umber with titanium white and water for a washout effect to create lighter halftones. It would have been better if I used yellow ochre to give a warmer effect for this first layer, but since I am using titanium white, I am neutralizing the values effect. The work of the shadow in the background will be the support of the composition to create a balance. As you see, I am not applying the same tonal gradation in the background. The background is not the same everywhere. The background is an essential part of the composition. That is what will make your subject stand out and highlight it. My advice for you in creating a balanced background is that you work according to the lightness and darkness of the subject. Balance and rhythm are important elements in creating a nice composition. Where my subject is lit, the background part is darker, and where there is darkness on my subject, the background part is lighter. In this case, the model's clothes and the hair are a link between the background and the foreground which means the face. When one of these transitional elements, either the clothes or the hair, is bright, the background is dark and bland, which creates the illusion of distance, and vice versa. I am using my computer as a screen-based reference instead of a print because the colors are closer to the original painting than the printing colors. Since I am not looking to copy exactly the same painting, I carefully and purposely keep my stroke through the glazing or washing effect. These strokes will give a unique trait to my work while respecting the expression of the portrait. I like to use acrylic paint because it dries really fast and gives me the effect I'm looking for, the appearance of my lines and the work underneath. I do not seek blurring effects in my work because I respect my strokes. Knowing that this is part 1, this work is a preliminary basis for the color which will come later on the canvas. Being inspired by the work of the masters that came before us, it is important to be able to visually understand the technique they used and analyze them in a creation of our own. Going to museums or having a live model and drawing what we see helps shape our visual analysis. We understand with our eyes the strokes and colors of original artwork. We are going to add burnt umber to accentuate the shadows. Towards the end, I accentuate the highlights with small touches of white mixed with umber. And that's it. Thanks for watching. If you have any question or request, don't hesitate to write it in the comment box below. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. It would help me a lot and encourage me to create more art videos. I'll see you next time. Ciao!